At 17, he and his sister were left with nothing but a rusty key and a deed to a place they'd never seen. What they discovered inside an abandoned fire station wasn't just a home. It was a secret that would force them to choose between a fortune and their family's soul. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if there was a place for you in this world, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you. We're building a community here for people who've had to fight for what's theirs, and I promise, you're not alone. The last day at Aunt Carol's house smelled like bleach and finality. For 2 years, every Tuesday had smelled that way, but this one felt different. It was the smell of being erased. Maya and I stood in the hallway, our 2 duffel bags slumped at our feet like tired dogs. They weren't much, just a collection of faded jeans, hoodies, and the few dog-eared paperbacks we'd managed to keep. Every other trace of us in that house was already gone. The photos from our nightstand were in a trash bag by the curb. Our toothbrushes were gone from the bathroom cup, and the faint indentations our bodies had made on the guest room mattresses were already starting to rise, forgetting us. Aunt Carol stood with her arms crossed, her floral housecoat a battlefield of pink and green. She wasn't yelling anymore. The storm had passed, leaving behind that quiet, dense air that comes after a hurricane. Her voice, when it came, was flat. "The bus station is 3 blocks east. You can't miss it." She didn't say where we were supposed to go from there. She didn't have to. The unspoken word hung in the air. Anywhere. I was 17, 3 months shy of the legal line that would supposedly turn me into an adult. Maya was 16, and her face was a mask of pale, furious disbelief. She was vibrating with things she wanted to scream, but she'd learned, as I had, that screaming at Aunt Carol was like throwing rocks at a brick wall. It only hurt your own hands. I nodded, my throat too tight to form words. I just wanted to get Maya out of there before the quiet broke again. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder. The weight of it, the sum total of my worldly possessions, felt both pathetic and crushingly heavy. "Leo," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. She was looking at the front door, at the world on the other side of it, a world that had no room for us. "It's okay," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "We'll figure it out. We always do." It was our mantra, a flimsy shield we'd held up against the world since our parents died. It had never been true, not really. We didn't figure things out. We just survived the things that were figured out for us. The foster homes, the group placements, and finally, our mother's estranged sister, who'd taken us in for the Social Security checks and the faint glow of martyrdom she could wear around her friends. For Maya's bag. Aunt Carol cleared her for Maya's bag. Aunt Carol cleared her throat. "One last thing." She walked to the little mahogany table by the door, the one we were never allowed to touch, and picked up a thick manila envelope. It was addressed to me. My name, Leo Vance, was written in a severe, blocky script. The return address was a law firm, Henderson and Associates. "This came for you last week," she said, holding it out. "It's from your grandfather's lawyer, or his estate, or whatever's left of it." My grandfather, Arthur Vance. We hadn't seen him since I was 10. He was a ghost, a name attached to a few faded photographs and our father's bitter stories. A man who'd supposedly wasted his life and his money on lost causes. He'd died a few months ago, and we'd only found out because a misdirected sympathy card had shown up in Aunt Carol's mailbox. We weren't invited to the funeral. I took the envelope. It felt heavy, important. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal. Inside, there wasn't a long, complicated letter full of legal jargon. There was just a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper, a small, rusted iron key taped to it, and a folded, brittle-looking document. The letter was brief. Mr. Vance, pursuant to the final testament of Arthur Vance, the enclosed property, located at 14 Cinder Road, Cinder Creek, is hereby transferred to you and your sister, Maya Vance, upon your 17th birthday. The transfer tax has been prepaid. The enclosed key is for the main access door. A secondary package containing personal effects is being held for you at our office. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Robert Henderson. I unfolded the other document. It was a deed, a quitclaim deed, to be precise. It listed the property, the parcel number, and the transfer details. And at the bottom, in the space for the sale price, a single absurd number was typed. $5. $5. My eyes scanned the words again, trying to make them compute. Property. Cinder Creek. A key. For a moment, a wild, impossible flicker of hope ignited in my chest. A place. A place that was ours. Maya leaned in, reading over my shoulder. Cinder Creek? Where's that? I have no idea, I breathed, staring at the key. It was old, the kind of skeleton key you see in movies. The rust was a deep, flaky orange, like dried blood. It felt ancient, heavy with a history I couldn't fathom. Aunt Carol snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound. Don't get your hopes up. If it came from your grandfather, it's probably a shack in the middle of nowhere with a leaky roof and a lien on it. The man didn't have a pot to piss in. Probably costs more in back taxes than it's worth. She looked at the clock on the wall. Time to go. I slid the papers and the key back into the envelope and clutched it to my chest. It felt like a heart transplant, a strange, foreign object suddenly beating inside me. Maybe it was a shack, maybe it was worthless, but it was something. It was an address. It was a destination. As we stepped out the door, the humid morning air hit my face. Aunt Carol didn't say goodbye. She just closed the door, and we heard the deadbolt slide into place. A final, metallic punctuation mark on that chapter of our lives. We stood on the sidewalk, the two of us, with our bags and an envelope that held either our salvation or our next great disappointment. So, Maya said, her voice small but steady. Cinder Creek? I looked at her, at the defiant tilt of her chin, the fear she was trying so hard to hide in her eyes. I tucked the envelope safely into the inner pocket of my jacket and zipped it up. Yeah, I said, managing a weak smile. Looks like we're going to Cinder Creek. We didn't have a map. We didn't have a plan. All we had was a name on a piece of paper and a key that promised, for better or worse, to open a door. And for the first time in a long time, we weren't just running from something. We were running toward it. The bus station was a sad, fluorescent-lit box that smelled of disinfectant and despair. The man behind the ticket counter had a face like a crumpled paper bag and looked at us with tired, indifferent eyes. Cinder Creek? He grunted, typing the name into his computer with 2 fingers. Haven't sold a ticket there in years. Bus only passes through twice a day. Once in the morning, once at night. You just missed the morning run. Of course we did. When's the next one? I asked, my stomach twisting. 10 p.m., he said, not looking up. Arrives around 3 in the morning. It's a flag stop. You gotta tell the driver you want off, or he'll blow right past it. He glanced up at us then, taking in our duffel bags and the weary look on our faces. A flicker of something, pity maybe, or just professional curiosity, crossed his face. "Ain't much out there, kids. You sure you got a reason to go?" "We have family there," Maya lied smoothly, her voice betraying no hint of the fact that our only known relative in the world had just locked us out of her house. The man just shrugged and printed the tickets. They took almost everything we had. Our entire fortune, a crumpled collection of ones and fives I'd saved from odd jobs, was reduced to a few dollars and some change. We spent the next 12 hours in the hard plastic chairs of the waiting room, a pair of urban castaways adrift in a sea of transient souls. We didn't talk much. The shock was starting to wear off, replaced by a deep, bone-aching weariness and the gnawing anxiety of the unknown. I watched Maya as she pretended to read a book, her eyes not moving from the page for 10 minutes at a time. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she chewed on her lower lip. She was scared. So was I. I was terrified. I was the older brother. I was supposed to be the one with the answers, the one who could make things right. But all I had was a rusty key and a $5 deed to a place that might not even exist. I took out the envelope again and studied the key. The rust came off on my fingers, a fine red powder. It was a simple object, but it felt like a puzzle, a question. What kind of door did it open? And what was our grandfather, the man our father had called a dreamer and a fool, trying to tell us with it? The bus that finally arrived was old, its sides streaked with dirt and its engine rumbling like a tired beast. We were the only ones who boarded. We found a seat in the back, the worn vinyl cool against our skin. As the bus pulled out of the station and into the dark, rain-slicked streets, the city lights began to blur and fade behind us, dissolving into a smear of orange and white. We were leaving the only world we'd ever known. I leaned my head against the vibrating window, the cold glass a small shock against my skin. The rhythmic thump-thump of the tires on the highway was hypnotic. For the first time all day, the knot in my stomach began to loosen, just a little. We were moving. We were in motion. And for now, that felt like enough. Maya fell asleep, her head eventually coming to rest on my shoulder. Her breathing was soft and even. In sleep, she looked younger, the hard lines of anger and fear gone from her face. She looked like the little sister I was supposed to protect. A wave of guilt washed over me. I'd let this happen. I hadn't been able to stop Aunt Carol. I hadn't been able to provide a safe, stable home for us. All I'd done was get us thrown out onto the street. But then my fingers closed around the key in my pocket. It was still there. A small, hard piece of reality in the darkness. It was a promise. Or a curse. I wouldn't know until we got there. I spent the next few hours staring out at the dark, fleeting shapes of the countryside. Trees became ghostly silhouettes against a moonless sky. The occasional farmhouse window glowed with a warm yellow light, a tiny beacon of a life that felt 1,000,000 miles away from mine. What kind of man was our grandfather? My father had painted him as a specter of failure, a man who'd had a good job, a firefighter, decorated even, and had thrown it all away. He'd quit the force early, cashed in his pension, and disappeared into obscurity, buying up worthless properties and chasing crackpot ideas. He could have owned half the city, my dad used to say, his voice thick with resentment. Instead, he bought dirt and rust. I wondered if that was the whole story. People become stories when they're gone, and the storyteller chooses which parts to tell. My dad had chosen to tell the one that made him feel better about his own life, his own choices. Maybe there was another version. Maybe this key was the first page. The bus driver's voice crackled over the intercom, jolting me from my thoughts. "Cinder Creek? Anyone for Cinder Creek?" I gently shook Maya awake. "We're here." She blinked, disoriented, her face creased from sleeping against the seam of my jacket. "Already?" The bus slowed, turning off the main highway onto a narrow, unlit road. It pulled to a stop beside a simple wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Cinder Creek, population 412. There was no station, no shelter, just the sign and a gravel shoulder. The driver opened the door, and a wave of cool, damp air filled the bus. It smelled of wet earth, pine needles, and something else. Smoke, a faint wood smoke smell that clung to everything. "This is it, kids," the driver said, his voice softer than the ticket agent's. "You sure you know where you're going?" "We'll find it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We grabbed our bags and stepped down onto the gravel. The bus door hissed shut behind us, and with a groan of its air brakes, the lumbering machine pulled away, its red taillights shrinking into the oppressive darkness until they were gone. And then there was silence. A profound, absolute quiet I had never experienced before. In the city there was always a hum, a distant siren, the rumble of a subway car. Here, the silence was a physical presence. It was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in a faint breeze. We were utterly, completely alone. We stood there for a long moment, two small figures on the edge of a dark road, the vast, starry skies stretching out above us like a cold, glittering blanket. There were more stars than I had ever seen in my life. They weren't just pinpricks. They were a thick, shimmering dust spilled across the blackness. "Okay," Maya said, her voice a hushed whisper. "Now what?" I pulled the envelope out again. 14 Cinder Road. The road we were on had no name that we could see. There were no streetlights, no sidewalks. Just the dark ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the trees. "I guess we just start walking," I said. We picked a direction and started. Our footsteps on the gravel shoulder sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet. Every snap of a twig in the woods beside us made us jump. The air was getting colder, and I could see my breath pluming in front of me. After about 15 minutes of walking, the road began to curve, and we saw the faint glow of a light up ahead. It was a single, flickering streetlight, casting a lonely yellow circle on the pavement. Beneath it was a crossroads and a signpost with faded, peeling paint. One of the arms pointed down the road we were on. It read, "Cinder Road." A small, giddy laugh escaped my lips. "We're on the right track." We kept walking, a renewed sense of purpose in our steps. The road started to show signs of civilization, or at least its remnants. We passed a boarded-up gas station, its pumps standing like rusted skeletons. Then a small, tidy house with a light on in the window, a plume of smoke curling from its chimney. This was the source of the smell. It was comforting, a sign of life. A few more houses appeared, most of them dark. The town, if you could call it that, seemed to be asleep. And then we saw it. Set back from the road, at the end of a cracked and weed-choked driveway, was a building that could only be one thing. It was a 2-story brick structure, wide and imposing, with 2 massive garage bay doors dominating the front. Above the doors, faded white letters, barely visible in the gloom, spelled out CCFD, Station Number 1. The Cinder Creek Fire Department. It wasn't a shack, it was a fire station. An old, abandoned, rusted-out fire station. The brick was stained with soot and grime, and several of the windows on the second floor were boarded up. A tall, skeletal tower rose from the side of the building, a hose tower, I guessed, its metal frame a lacework of rust against the night sky. A single, bare flagpole stood in the small patch of overgrown grass out front, its rope tapping a lonely rhythm against the metal in the breeze. It was bigger, stranger, and more derelict than anything I could have imagined. "No way," Maya breathed, stopping dead in the middle of the road. "That's it? That's our house?" It looked less like a house and more like a tomb, a monument to a time when this town was alive enough to need its own fire department. I walked up the cracked driveway, my boots crunching on loose gravel. The scale of the place was intimidating. The bay doors were huge, big enough for a fire engine, their paint peeling in long, curling strips. To the left of the main doors was a smaller, regular-sized door, its paint a faded, chipped fire engine red. It had a single, heavy-looking lock. I pulled the key from my pocket. My hand was shaking again, this time from a mixture of cold, exhaustion, and a terrifying, exhilarating hope. This was it, the moment of truth. I approached the red door. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. Spider webs laced the corners of the frame, glistening with dew. I took a deep breath and slid the rusty iron key into the lock. For a heart-stopping second, it wouldn't turn. My stomach plummeted. Of course. It was all a joke, a mistake. But then I jiggled it, pushing it in a little further, and with a horrible, grinding screech of metal on metal, the lock turned. The click of the mechanism unlocking was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It echoed in the silent night, a sound of passage, of entry. I put my shoulder to the door and pushed. It resisted, groaning in protest, its bottom edge scraping against the concrete stoop. But then it gave way, swinging inward into a pitch-black space. A wave of cold, musty air washed over us, the smell of dust, damp concrete, and something else. A faint metallic tang, like old oil in forgotten machinery. It was the smell of long-abandoned work. We stood on the threshold, peering into the darkness. We couldn't see a thing. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small and thin in the vast space. The only answer was the echo of my own voice, bouncing off distant walls. This was our inheritance. This was our home. A dark, cavernous, and possibly haunted fire station in the middle of a dying town. And as I stood there, shivering in the cold night air, I felt a strange and powerful mix of terror and elation. We were home. The darkness inside was absolute. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb with cold, and turned on the flashlight. The thin beam cut a nervous path through the gloom, revealing a space of astonishing size. We were standing in the engine bay. The ceiling soared 20 feet above us, crisscrossed with steel beams and conduit. The floor was stained concrete, and the air was thick with dust motes dancing in the light. To our right, a fire pole, its brass gleam long gone under a coat of grime, disappeared up through a hole in the ceiling. Along the far wall were empty lockers, their doors hanging open like mouths in a silent scream. The space was cavernous, empty, and achingly lonely. It was an echo chamber of departed purpose. Maya stepped in behind me, her eyes wide. "Leo, this place is huge." "And empty," I added, my voice hushed. We started to explore, our flashlight beams sweeping across the cavernous room. We found an old workbench, littered with rusted tools, a coiled, rotting fire hose in a corner, and a faded map of the county tacked to a corkboard, its edges curled and yellowed with age. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, a gray blanket that had settled over years of neglect. It was like walking through a museum exhibit on the concept of forgotten. There was a door at the back of the engine bay. It led to a small, cramped office. A metal desk sat in the middle of the room, its surface bare except for a thick film of dust. An old rotary phone sat on one corner, its cord chewed through by mice. The chair was just a metal frame. The vinyl seat had long since cracked and fallen away. On the wall, a calendar was still turned to July 1998. 20 years. This place had been sitting silent for 20 years. My beam caught something on the desk. Tucked into the corner, almost hidden in the shadows, was a small metal strongbox. It was a simple gray cash box, the kind you'd see at a yard sale. It was locked. I picked it up. It was heavy, and something rattled inside. A new wave of adrenaline shot through me. This was it. This had to be the personal effects the lawyer's letter had mentioned. Why it was here and not at his office, I didn't know. Maybe our grandfather wanted us to find it here, in this place. "What is it?" Maya asked, peering over my shoulder. "I don't know," I said, shaking it gently again. "But I think it's from him." We took the box back out into the main bay. We had no way to open it. I looked at the workbench, at the rusted tools. I found a heavy-duty screwdriver and a hammer. It felt wrong, like a desecration, but we had no other choice. I wedged the tip of the screwdriver into the seam near the lock and struck the handle hard with the hammer. The sound was a deafening clang that ricocheted around the huge room. It took 3 more hits before the cheap metal of the lock gave way with a pained groan. The lid popped open. With trembling hands, I lifted it. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed cotton, were 3 things. The first was a thick stack of cash, $100 bills bound with a brittle rubber band. I lifted the stack out. It was heavy, solid. I fanned the edges with my thumb. I'd never seen so much money in my life. There had to be thousands of dollars there. Maya gasped. "Leo, is that real?" "I think so," I whispered, my mind reeling. We were homeless and broke one minute, and the next we were holding a small fortune. Beneath where the money had been was a small, leather-bound journal. Its cover was worn smooth with use, and next to it was a thick, sealed envelope. On the front, in a familiar, spidery handwriting I recognized from the one birthday card I'd ever received from him, were our names. Leo and Maya. This was it, the real inheritance. I set the cash aside. It suddenly seemed less important. I picked up the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. This was his voice, reaching out to us from across the years. I carefully tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. It was several pages long, the paper thin and covered in that same cramped script. I angled my phone's light onto the page and began to read aloud, my voice shaky in the cold, silent fire station. "My dearest Leo and Maya," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone. It also means you have found your way here, to this place I chose for you. I am sorry I could not be there to give this to you myself. I am sorry for a great many things, most of all for the distance between us. Your father, my son, never forgave me for the choices I made. I hope that by the time you finish this letter, you will understand, if not forgive." I paused, taking a breath. The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of his words. Maya moved closer, her arm pressing against mine for warmth and comfort. I continued reading. "I was a firefighter for 25 years. It wasn't just a job. It was who I was. I saw this town, Cinder Creek, in its prime. It was a logging town, a place of hard work and decent people. This very station was the heart of it, a place of safety and community. But times changed. The mill closed. People moved away. The town started to die. And as it died, powerful people started to see it not for what it was, but for what it could be. Cheap land for the taking. His handwriting grew angrier here, the letters sharp and slanted. A corporation, a development group came to town. They called themselves Apex. They promised jobs, a new resort, a new life for the valley. But it was a lie. They wanted the water rights. This valley has one of the last clean aquifers in the region. They wanted to buy up the land, drain the water, and sell it to bottling plants in the city. They would have turned this whole place into a dust bowl and walked away with billions, leaving the few people left here with nothing. They pressured everyone, bought them out for pennies on the dollar, threatening them with legal action if they refused. People were scared. They sold. I looked up from the letter, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Apex, a development group. It sounded so familiar, so modern, a story that happened every day. I saw what was happening, I read on, and I knew I couldn't just stand by, but I was just one man. I didn't have the money to fight them in court, but I had my pension, I had my savings. It wasn't much, not compared to them, but I had an idea, a crazy one, your father would say. I couldn't save the whole town, but I could save its heart. I started buying up the key parcels of land, the ones Apex needed most to control the access to the water table. I bought this fire station from the county for back taxes. I bought the old mill property. I bought the deed to the access road. I used every penny I had. I put everything in a trust under your names. It made me look like a fool, a crazy old man buying up worthless, derelict property. My own son thought I'd lost my mind, that I was throwing away his inheritance. He was right. I was. I was throwing away his inheritance to give you yours. A lump formed in my throat. I had to stop reading for a moment to swallow it. The story my father had told us, the story of a foolish, wasteful old man, was cracking apart, revealing something entirely different underneath. He hadn't been wasting his money. He'd been fighting a war. This place, this fire station, isn't just a building, the letter continued. It's a fortress. It sits directly on top of the main aquifer access point. As long as it stands, and as long as the owner refuses to sell, they cannot drill. They cannot take the water. This $5 deed is your shield. The money in this box is your ammunition. It's not a lot, I know. It's all I had left. But it should be enough to pay the property taxes for a few years, to fix the leaks in the roof, to buy you time. Time to learn, to grow strong, to understand what you are protecting. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the page still. This wasn't an inheritance of property. It was an inheritance of responsibility, a legacy of defiance. He hadn't left us a home. He'd left us a choice. Now I must tell you the hard part, I read, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Apex will not have given up. They are patient. They will have been waiting for me to die. They will come for you. They will offer you money, more money than you have ever dreamed of. They will tell you it's a fair price for a worthless old building in a ghost town. They will promise you a new life, an easy life. It will be a powerful temptation. You will be young, and you will have known hardship. The choice to take their money and walk away will be the easiest choice you will ever have to make. I looked at the stack of cash sitting on the floor. It was already a life-changing amount of money for us. The idea of something more, something even bigger, was dizzying. What would we do? What would I do? But I am begging you, Leo, Maya, the letter concluded. Don't take it. This land is more than just dirt and water. It's the last piece of something real. It's a place where community meant more than profit. By keeping it, you are not just protecting a resource. You are holding on to a principle. You are honoring the people who built this town, the people who fought for it. It will not be easy. They will fight you. But you are Vances, and we do not back down from a fight that matters. The choice is yours. A life of comfort built on a lie, or a life of struggle built on the truth. I hope you choose the truth. I hope you choose to stay. I hope you can turn this old fire station not just into your home, but into a beacon. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you. I have always loved you. Your grandfather, Arthur. The letter ended there. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It was filled with the weight of his words, with the gravity of the choice he had laid at our feet. Maya was crying, silent tears tracking paths through the grime on her cheeks. I wasn't crying. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my own past, had been a lie. My grandfather wasn't a fool. He was a hero, and he had just handed his war to us. I carefully folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I picked up the journal. I opened it. It was filled with his daily thoughts, notes about the town, research on water rights, legal strategies. It was a manual for the fight ahead. And then there was the cash, $10,000. It was our war chest. "Leo?" Maya's voice was fragile. "What are we going to do?" I looked around the vast, dark space, at the dust, the rust, the decay. It was an impossible task. We were just kids. We didn't know how to fight a corporation. We didn't know how to fix a roof or pay property taxes, or even how to start a fire to keep warm. And yet, I looked at the fire pole, a straight, unbending line of purpose. I looked at the empty space where the engine should be, a space waiting to be filled. This place wasn't dead. It was just sleeping. "I don't know," I said honestly. And for the first time, not knowing felt less like a failure and more like a beginning. We spent that first night huddled together in the old office, wrapped in the few clothes we had. We didn't sleep much. The weight of our grandfather's letter, of the choice he'd given us, was too heavy. The $10,000 sat between us, a silent testament to his sacrifice and a constant temptation. The next morning, the sun streamed through the grimy windows of the engine bay, illuminating the thick clouds of dust our exploration had kicked up. The light transformed the space. It was no longer a tomb, but a cathedral of neglect, full of potential and forgotten stories. We were hungry, cold, and exhausted, but for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose. We spent the day taking stock. The building was structurally sound, a fortress of brick and steel, just as he'd said. The roof was leaking in a few places, and the plumbing was a complete unknown, but it was solid. It was ours. That afternoon, a sleek black car I never would have expected to see in a place like Cinder Creek pulled up out front. A man in a tailored suit got out. He was holding a briefcase and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He walked right up to the front door as if he owned the place. "Hello there," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm from the Apex Development Group. I was so sorry to hear about your grandfather's passing. We'd been in negotiations with him for years. I'm here to renew our offer to you, his heirs." He didn't waste any time. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a contract. "We know the property is in disrepair. We know you're young. We are prepared to offer you $500,000, a fresh start, enough to go to college, buy a house, Never worry again. $500,000. The number just hung in the air, shimmering. It was an impossible, absurd amount of money. It was the easy life our grandfather had warned us about. It was the ultimate test. Maya looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, longing. I could see her picturing it. A warm apartment, new clothes, food in the fridge. No more running, no more fear. The man from Apex saw it too. His smile widened. You don't have to decide now. Take your time. My card is in here. Just know that this is a life-changing opportunity. He slid the folder with the contract through the gap in the door. I didn't take it. I let it fall to the concrete floor. I looked at the man, at his expensive suit and his predatory smile. I thought of my grandfather, spending his last years alone in this dying town, using every penny he had to fight this man, this company. I thought of his letter, of the trust he had placed in us. Thank you for the offer, I said, my voice steady and clear. But we're not for sale. The man's smile faltered for just a second. He looked from me to Maya, then back again. He saw the doubt in her eyes. Perhaps your sister feels differently, he said, directing his words to her. This is a big decision. Are you sure you want to live in this? He gestured around at the crumbling station. That was his mistake. The moment he tried to divide us, I saw the fire ignite in Maya's eyes. The doubt was replaced by a familiar, stubborn anger. She stepped up beside me, her shoulder pressing against mine. He's right, she said, her voice ringing with a strength I hadn't heard in years. We're not for sale. This is our home. Now please leave. The man from Apex stared at us for a long moment. The mask of politeness dropped, and for a fleeting second, I saw the cold, hard calculation underneath. He shrugged, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. The offer stands, he said curtly. When you're freezing in the dark this winter, you'll change your mind. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. We watched him drive away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The silence he left behind was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with our decision. We had made our choice. We had chosen the hard way. We had chosen to stay. We had chosen to fight. The magnitude of that choice settled on us as the dust from the car settled on the driveway. $500,000. We had turned down a fortune. For what? For a pile of bricks, a principle, a letter from a dead man. Was it bravery, or was it the stupidest decision two teenagers had ever made? That night, the doubt came creeping back in. The fire station seemed colder, darker, more menacing. Every creak of the old building sounded like a mockery. Maya was quiet, withdrawn. I knew she was thinking about the money, about the life we'd thrown away. I found her huddled in a corner of the bay, staring at the contract the Apex man had left on the floor. Maybe we made a mistake, Leo, she whispered, not looking at me. What are we even doing here? We don't know how to do any of this. I sat down next to her on the cold concrete. I know, I said. I'm scared too. But did you read his journal? I slid the leather-bound book over to her. He wasn't just a dreamer, Maya. He was a planner. He has notes in there. About the plumbing, about the wiring, about the town charter. He spent years getting ready for this fight. He ran out of time. She opened the journal. Her eyes scanned the pages of neat, methodical notes. She saw the diagrams he'd drawn of the water pipes, the list of local contractors who could be trusted, the legal precedents he'd researched. It wasn't the ramblings of a madman. It was a battle plan. He believed in us, I said softly. He left this for us. Not just the building, but the whole fight. He trusted us to finish it. I picked up the contract from the floor. It felt slick and dishonest in my hands. "This," I said, holding it up, "is an ending. It's the end of his story, the end of this town's story. But that building," I pointed into the gloom, "that's a beginning. Our beginning." I ripped the contract in half, and then in half again, the sound of the tearing paper sharp and satisfying in the quiet. I let the pieces fall to the floor. Maya watched me, a new light dawning in her eyes. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Resolve. The next day, we took $100 from our grandfather's war chest and walked into town. It wasn't much of a town. A single main street with a post office, a small grocery store, and a diner with a buzzing neon sign. People watched us as we walked, their gazes curious but not unfriendly. They were faces weathered by hard work and harder times. We bought cleaning supplies, thick work gloves, and enough canned food to last a week. The woman at the grocery store, a stern-looking lady with kind eyes named Martha, looked at our pile of goods. "You the Vance kids?" she asked. We nodded, surprised. "Heard you were in town, staying out at the old fire station." "We are," I said. "We're fixing it up." She gave a small, sad smile. "Arthur tried for years. It's a big job." She paused, then leaned forward conspiratorially. "Heard you had a visitor yesterday, man in a fancy car." News traveled fast in Cinder Creek. "We did," Maya said. "He made us an offer." Martha just nodded slowly, her eyes searching our faces. "Arthur turned them down for 20 years. Said he was saving it for his grandkids. Said you'd know what to do." She bagged our groceries. "If you need anything, you come see me. And tell that Henderson fella you're here. He's been holding a package for Arthur for a long time." Robert Henderson's law office was a small, unassuming storefront next to the post office. The man himself was older, with a fringe of white hair and a face etched with the worries of 1,000 small-town legal battles. He looked us up and down over his reading glasses when we walked in. "Mr. Henderson? We're Leo and Maya Vance." His expression softened immediately. He stood up and shook our hands. "I've been expecting you. I am so very sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a great man, stubborn as a mule, but a great man." He went to a filing cabinet and pulled out a large, sealed box. "He left this with me. He said to give it to you only after you had decided to stay." He placed the box on his desk. It was heavy. Inside, we found what our grandfather's letter had been missing: the tools. There were detailed architectural plans for the fire station, not as it was, but as it could be. Plans for a small apartment upstairs, for a workshop in the bay, for a greenhouse out back. There were also files, thick with legal documents, affidavits from former townspeople about Apex's tactics, geological surveys of the aquifer, environmental impact reports. And finally, there was a letter of introduction to a pro bono environmental law group that specialized in fighting corporate water grabs. He hadn't just left us a shield and some ammunition. He'd left us an entire armory. He'd left us a roadmap. Mr. Henderson explained the legal situation. The trust our grandfather had set up was ironclad. As long as we paid the modest property taxes and refused to sell, Apex couldn't touch the land. Their only move was to wait us out, to hope we would give up. "They'll play dirty," he warned. "They'll try to condemn the building. They'll challenge the zoning. They'll try to bury you in paperwork. But Arthur did his homework. He's given you a fighting chance. We walked out of that office into the afternoon sun, the heavy box between us. The path ahead was no clearer, but we no longer felt like we were walking it alone. We had our grandfather's plan. We had a town that was watching, waiting, hoping. We got back to the station, and for the first time, we didn't see the rust and the dust. We saw the plans. We saw the future. We started that day. We started with one corner of the engine bay. We swept away 20 years of dust. We scrubbed the concrete floor until we could see the original paint beneath. We washed the grime from one of the tall windows, and for the first time, clean, clear sunlight streamed into the building, cutting a bright square on the floor. It was a small victory, a tiny patch of order in a universe of chaos. But it was ours. We had made it. That night, we found an old wood-burning stove in one of the back rooms. It was rusted, but intact. We spent hours cleaning it out, and using the instructions in our grandfather's journal, we figured out how to fix the flue. We used some of the scrap wood from a collapsed shed out back to build our first fire. As the flames caught, a warm, orange glow pushed back the oppressive darkness. We sat before it, the first real warmth we'd felt in days seeping into our bones. The fire crackled, a cheerful, living sound in the vast, quiet building. It wasn't a house yet. It wasn't even close. It was a cold, empty shell filled with ghosts and problems. But as I watched the flames dance, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that we were home. Looking back, that first week was the hardest. Every task was monumental. Figuring out the water, patching the most immediate roof leaks, clearing out decades of debris. It was overwhelming. But we had the journal, our grandfather's voice guiding us. And we had the $10,000, which we spent carefully, buying supplies from the local hardware store, whose owner, a gruff man named Bill, started giving us a discount after our third visit. He never said why. He didn't have to. We were becoming part of the town, not just as Arthur Vance's grandkids, but as the kids who were crazy enough to try and save the old fire station. People started helping in small ways. Martha from the grocery store would drop off a box of day-old produce. Bill would leave a pile of perfectly good scrap lumber by our driveway. One day, an old man who introduced himself as a retired plumber showed up and spent 6 hours helping us get the water running, refusing any payment other than a cup of coffee. He'd been on the volunteer fire crew with our grandfather. "Arthur saved my house once," he said, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "Least I can do is help his grandkids save his." We were building more than just a home. We were rebuilding a community. We turned the upstairs, the old sleeping quarters for the firefighters, into our apartment. We painted the walls, sanded the floors, and found furniture at the town's tiny thrift store. The fire pole, which we'd polished until the brass shone, became our ridiculous, glorious staircase. The big engine bay became our project. It was a space of infinite possibility. We started a small repair service for the locals, fixing lawnmowers, sharpening tools, anything to bring in a little money. We used our grandfather's plans to build a small, efficient greenhouse against the south-facing wall, and we started growing our own food. Apex didn't give up. We'd get letters from their lawyers. We'd see their surveyors on the edge of our property. But with the help of the Environmental Law Group and Mr. Henderson, we answered every challenge. We became experts in zoning laws and water rights. We weren't just kids in over their heads anymore. We were guardians. One evening, about a year after we'd arrived, Maya and I were sitting on the roof of the station, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was clean, the only sound the distant call of a bird. The fire station below us was alive. Lights glowed from the windows of our apartment. The greenhouse was thriving, and the big bay doors were open, revealing a space that was no longer empty, but filled with the tools and projects of our new life. "Do you ever think about the money?" I asked her. She was quiet for a long time, watching the last sliver of sun disappear behind the mountains. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I think about how easy it would have been. But then I look at this." She swept her arm out, indicating not just the building, but the whole valley, the quiet town, the life we had built with our own 2 hands. "And I know we made the right choice. This is worth more than money, Leo. This is ours." And she was right. Our inheritance wasn't the building, or the land, or even the responsibility. It was the choice. The choice to fight for something that mattered. The choice to build instead of sell out. The choice to define home not as a place you are given, but as a place you create. My grandfather had given us a key to a door, but it was up to us to walk through it and build a life on the other side. He gave us a second chance, not just at having a home, but at having a purpose. He taught us that the most valuable things are never the ones with a price tag. They are the things you have to fight for, the things you have to protect, the things you have to build yourself. And that's a lesson that changed us forever. This whole journey, from that curb outside Aunt Carol's house to the roof of our fire station, taught me that your past doesn't have to be your future. Sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your real life. It's the day you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the architect of your own future. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to start over or fight for something you believe in, I want you to do 2 things. First, hit that like button and subscribe, because we share stories here for fighters, for survivors, for the people who are building their own homes in a world that often tries to kick them out. Second, I want you to go down to the comments and tell me about a time you chose the harder path because it was the right one. I read every single comment, and your stories matter. They remind all of us in this community that we are not alone in the fight. Thank you for listening, and remember, no matter how dark it gets, you always have the power to build your own light.